welcome to our edition of the HR Issue podcast. And we're here today, and I'm very excited to be joined by the wonderful Michelle Hartley. Now, Michelle, when I do these types of things, I always butcher people's introductions, right? So I think who's better to give the best elevator pitch about yourself other than yourself, right? And I'm a big fan of yours online, by the way, so I know you're pretty good at this. So for our listeners who don't know who you are, tell us who you are and what you do.
Love this. Michelle Hartley. I run an organisation called People Sorted, and my background, I think we spoke about this before we recorded, but my background is an HR lifer. So I'm one of those people who has always been in HR, which is a bit weird because people tend to fall into it, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
But always in HR. And I basically transform HR teams from beige to brilliant through one-to-one coaching, training, and my HR community called the HR Geek Squad.
I love the HR Geek Squad. So I see you all over LinkedIn. I see you're very, very active. And this beige to brilliant thing, why that? Why does that matter to you?
It originally is because I spent my career, my HR career, in-house career, being like this mask of myself. So had to be very corporate, very laughable, professional, and hide away kind of my true thoughts, feelings, opinions about stuff because I had to be this corporate human. So for me now, my kind of release into the real world is part of that. So I think helping other HR people to escape the beige and have personalities, colour, and a bit of life in their job.
Be human, right? Isn't that crazy that we're in 2025 and all of a sudden thinking, oh, we can be human at work. How exciting. What a novelty.
Exactly.
And I love the work that you do. And actually, it's really, really topical. So this whole season is around well-being. And this episode in particular, and what I'm really excited to talk to you about is how do we shake up well-being for what is an increasingly blended, complex, diverse workforce, where we work, how we show up, where we show up. Businesses are doing things differently. We've got full-timers, part-timers, contingency workers, at home, remote, in the office, whatever. It's everywhere. There's all sorts of different levels of complexity. So a really, really interesting conversation. But what I ask everyone in this season, I'm curious as to hear your thoughts on this, because I know it's a very personal thing to lots of different people. What does well-being mean to you?
I love this question so much. So for me, it's about feeling connected. And I think I spent a long, long period of time in my career not being connected at all to myself, to my needs, to things I wanted. So for me, it's that feeling of connectedness. So feeling like I'm connected to the work that I do and it adds purpose and value. And also just feeling like I'm listening and tuning into what I need on any given day. And I think in my in-house career, I just switched off from that. I literally spoke to a friend this morning. I was like, oh my God, how do we do this roboting thing that we used to do every day? So yeah, connected for me.
Connected, yeah. And that's really fascinating because we do our own research, and one of our most recent reports showed, and this is what it makes me sad, it makes me angry, but I'm kind of not shocked at the same time. As many as 25% of UK workers experience frequent loneliness in the workplace, right?
Yeah.
And that's despite us being so digitally connected, so almost impossible to switch off. Work-life balance, in my opinion, doesn't really exist anymore. It's a work-life smashing together, and the lines are so blurred, it's ridiculous. Yeah. So I think this connectedness thing is a really interesting topic, and we're going to get into this. But just on the whole debate around where you work, how you work, what's your kind of view on that? Obviously, there's different opinions for different industries, different companies, different people. What's your kind of take on it about the best place to work and how to show up?
Yeah, I love this because I always say my heart is in manufacturing. So I did a lot of my in-house career was engineering, manufacturing type businesses where you had to be present on the shop floor with everybody, understanding what they did and how they did it. So I guess initially for when COVID hit, for example, I genuinely was like, I don't know how we're supposed to do this work lark by not being there. So initially I was kind of quite anti it, I guess. And then as COVID dragged on and on and on and on, I actually found it much better. And I found myself being able to be much more kind of boundaried and connected by working from home. So I think there's a balance in terms of that hybrid space for me that's the optimum. But again, we've got to have all of those surrounding kind of bits like communication, training, the connection piece, haven't we, to make the hybrid stuff really work.
Yeah, and we're going to dig into that, no doubt at all. But I guess if we take them one at a time, if we think about pre-COVID, because I was the same. I remember I used to work in a fashion organization in West London. I'm down in Brighton. That was like a 2-hour minimum commute each way around the M25. But you were there 5 days a week.
Yeah.
And that was just what you did. And then COVID happens, and then we all think about the world differently, and we all kind of show up differently, and I guess our priorities change, and our alarms change when we found a respectable time to get out of bed, and our commuting preferences change.
Yeah.
But going back to that world where people were in the office all of the time, so maybe in your manufacturing experience or whatever, what are the benefits to that, do you think? People being together physically in one space, from a well-being perspective, what do you think are the benefits?
Yeah, I think there's that connection bit, isn't there, where you kind of learn and connect by osmosis. Like for me, I really missed just those weird water cooler conversations where you'd be walking between meetings, you're grabbing a drink, you're having those convos about random stuff that's happened, but it's something that'll make something else land.
Yeah.
So I think for me, that stuff was quite important and I genuinely missed that.
Yeah. And do you think that's something that's lacking in 2025? Do you think we're missing some of that in work, but also maybe society perhaps as a whole?
Yeah, I think we're missing something. I don't think fully remote is the way to go. I think having choice and flexibility is the way to go. So I think we have to work harder at creating those connections when we're based at home or we're working remotely. And I think that's the challenge, isn't it? Because you kind of find yourself, or I did anyway, going literally back to back to back to back to back because you just sat at your desk, so why not? And so it's kind of creating some of those smaller spaces to literally just connect.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And I guess for those organizations who are back to the office and everyone's in 3, 4, 5 days a week, and that choice is perhaps not as apparent for people, that's how that organization wants to run, absolutely fine. What are the drawbacks, do you think, of having people back in the office all of the time, given how the world has evolved so quickly?
Yeah, I don't know if you find this, but I think we're missing a trick with talent if we're pulling people straight back into the office and doing it arbitrarily and not really thinking about what the people might need or what teams or the organisation really needs. So prior to COVID, I was in an engineering type organisation and their phrase was, "We are just not a home working organisation." And of course, we survived for almost 2 years being a home working organisation. So for me, I think there's something about that choice and balance between the two to make it work better.
Yeah, I think that's really fascinating when people say it's just doesn't work for our industry, it doesn't work for our employees and that sort of stuff.
Exactly.
And one of the things I always try and talk about is that what you want to do, or is that what your employees want to do? Is that just because of the way you've always done it, or have you gone out and asked people what they want from your organization and to work with you?
Yeah.
I think it's an interesting one. It's one of those things, it's kind of on your head be it. If you kind of force one way or the other, by the way, I'm not saying there's any right or wrong answer here, but if you say this is the way we do it around here, but your employees think, wait a minute, that's not the way I want to do it around here, then it might be quite difficult for that talent piece, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen some organizations doing like collaboration days or collaboration weeks where everybody comes in at the same time.
Nice.
And I really like that. I think that's got that kind of water cooler chat appeal. I mean, I don't smoke, but the go for a cigarette kind of appeal where you kind of all chat together and just have a random 5-minute breather.
Yeah.
I think that helps that kind of stuff. And I still think there is a space for humans getting together and connecting.
Yeah.
I just think it needs to be more thoughtful and well thought out in terms of like doing the right things or saying no online meetings on the days when you're in the office or something, you know, trying to make it more connecting, I think, just the way forward.
Yeah, I mean, across Reward Gateway and Edenred, that's kind of how the approach we've taken is it's not necessarily where you show up, it's why you show up.
Yeah.
So if it is an in-person thing, then it's meaningful, it's thoughtful, it's deliberate, it's around connection, collaboration, teamwork, relationship building, all of that sort of stuff. And that works for our people rather than saying, you've got to be in XXX. Actually, it's we're doing this thing. We'd love you to be in there in person because you'll find all the value in your relationships and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And just on the connection piece, obviously you're speaking very passionately about it. In your experience of why that matters to our well-being, being connected or feeling like you're alone, what are the kind of drawbacks or what things have you seen happen where people perhaps are flourishing because they are connected, or the opposite, where they're feeling disconnected? What do you see happening to those people?
Yeah, it's a good question. I know we spoke about this in our pre-chat, didn't we, about the dark side of remote working. And I think it's, for me, I was reflecting on it after we had our chat, but for me, I think when you're doing something that's solely remote or you're living on a screen, it's only what you show people in that moment, isn't it? So I do a lot of training, for example, and I'll go full jazz hands on the screen. But then when I'm like just sat and being a normal human, I don't do jazz hands. But obviously all those people that see me in that moment think, oh, Michelle must be jazz hands all day, every day. Okay. But the reality is actually sometimes I need a bit of downtime and a bit of a break and that kind of stuff. And I think the same goes the other way almost for this remote working space where people will only show us what we see in that Zoom window, that Teams window for the time that we're together, right? Whereas if we're together in the office, you might pick up on some of those nuances of body language, someone's mood, someone's feelings, and you won't necessarily pick that up in a remote space in the same way.
Yeah, that's a really great point, because I guess when you're in person, if someone's not feeling it for whatever reason, because as we said earlier, we're all humans, right? So if stuff is happening, particularly outside of work or inside of work, or you just turn on the news and it kind of gets to you, difficult to tell via a screen if there's a change in someone's demeanor, but actually maybe spot that a little bit more if you're there physically. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, completely. And even when we were in lockdown, I used to get my team to do a feels out of 10 every day. So we'd start the day with a COVID meme, and then we'd have our feels out of 10, 10 being the worst, 1 being the best. And it was really interesting for me to see how they genuinely were feeling, because you wouldn't ever tell. And so somebody would give me like oh my God, I'm the worst I've ever felt today. And I'd just be like, this is unbelievable. Like, you never would have got it if you hadn't had that small activity.
Mm-hmm.
And interestingly, you will have seen on LinkedIn, I do a Friday check-in with everybody with a stupid collection of images and to get people to check in. My most popular post every week is the Friday check-in. So it shows that there's still power in that connection and doing something real, checking in on people and how they're feeling. People want to do it, don't they?
Yeah, 100%. I think we're social creatures. We want to feel like we're part of something. We want to feel like we've got purpose. We want to feel like we're connected with other like-minded people who not necessarily think the way we do, but at least have an empathy for how we kind of show up and interact and all that sort of good stuff. And I guess maybe go into that then. So you've talked about on your LinkedIn, you're very deliberate with some of the stuff you do, your Friday check-in. I think I saw you chuck some stuff in the bin on a weekly basis, don't you? I saw your HR community thing that you do as well, but Cars Against Humanity or Cars Against HR.
Yeah, that's
really funny, but it gets people kind of interacting and kind of feeling like they're part of that HR community.
Yeah.
How do you think organizations can be better at setting people up remotely or from home or wherever they want to work to almost replicate the connection that they can get from being physically together? Have you got any experiences, either what you do yourself or perhaps what you've seen other businesses do, that are really quite smart or simple to say, hey, you may be at home more often than not, but here's how we can keep you connected to what's going on?
Yeah, I was trying to remember the name of the software actually, but there's a software that you can have that is basically a virtual office space. And so if you hover your cursor near someone's door in this virtual office space, it's literally like hovering real life at the door, so you can hear them and the sound will come up. And Perry Timms uses it quite a lot, and I cannot remember for the life of me what the software is called, but it's brilliant because it gives you that kind of proximity. You know people online, you know when they're checking in, that kind of stuff. So having that connected software, I think, is really important.
Yeah.
And I think it's genuinely just making that effort, which sounds ridiculous, but if you don't, you get stuck in that robot environment, don't you, of just the next meeting, the next thing.
Yeah.
And actually, I think it's creating the space deliberately and intentionally to have a chat, check in, see how people are. And I think that's really important. And I think having things like the appreciation side of things, so having those, kudos software setups where you can get points, prizes, all that good stuff, I think is really important to continue that both face-to-face and from remote. So I think that's something that's really powerful as well. Yeah,
so it sounds there like it's a little bit of thoughtfulness and perhaps deliberate action. If you kind of leave it to chance or you leave it to you're meant to do it, but never got around to it, I guess if you're there physically and I'm sat in front of you, you might be the reminder that I need to say thank you or to appreciate you or check in. How's it going? Are you okay? But if we're not physically together and I don't see you, but I don't have anything set up to remind me or to help me, whether that's through automation software or just a really simple calendar invite that you put in your own diary, then I quite easily forget to check in on you. And all of a sudden we've gone days, weeks without even speaking to each other.
Yeah.
So that I can understand why that would quite easily happen in a busy world, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, with that said then, just thinking about the role of a manager then in there. So managers, I think, get a bit of a hard time.
They do.
I think it's one of those tasks that's like almost impossible to do because I remember when I first became a manager, right? This is going back, I'm not going to say my age on camera, but going back a good 15 years now is when I first started managing people. And my perception of what it meant to be a manager at that time was from my existing manager, but let's just say was a little bit traditional in his management style, kind of the you're being paid to do a job mindset rather than you actually are a person. Thankfully, we have evolved a lot since then. But one of the things that's definitely changed is the complexity of us as human beings, as in the world's more complicated. What we want and desire from our employers is definitely far greater perhaps than it has been before. And managers, I think, are having to deal with all of that as well as being operational and tactical and strategic. What do you think managers can do more of or less of to make sure they stay connected to their teams?
Yeah, I think, like you say, managers get such a bad rap, don't they? Sometimes they deserve it.
Yeah.
Sometimes they don't.
True. I can think of a few, to be fair. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a list of those.
Yeah. Yeah. Not on my Christmas card list. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, again, managers for me are the ones that have to be intentional and make that space, and they have to lead by example in the way that, if they're not boundaried and, working sensibly, their team won't be boundaried and working sensibly. They have to realise that they are creating that kind of example for everybody else. So I think part of it is create the space, be intentional about it. And for managers, I always say this when I do leadership development stuff, is think about what 1% better can look like. Okay. Because often I think managers, as you quite well identified, are kind of squeezed from both ends, aren't they? So they're pushed by the senior leadership team and they're pushed by their employees, and they kind of end up in this mushy middle where it can feel really overwhelming, all of the different priorities and things they've got to do. So for me, I think thinking about 1% better, 1% different. Let's make tomorrow 1% more fun if you've had a really crap day. So those kinds of things, I think, feel more achievable for managers to be able to take with their teams.
I love that. So it feels less kind of daunting, I suppose, and more just a marginal gains type mindset. You could just make this afternoon better than this morning.
Yeah.
Tomorrow better than yesterday.
Yeah.
Then that's a step forward in the right direction. And that becomes much more achievable on their very busy to-do list, right?
Exactly.
And I think it's one of those interesting things. I think the role of the manager, particularly when it comes to hybrid teams or remote teams or blend, full-time workers, part-time workers, whatever it might be, the one thing we should never forget is managers and leaders are human beings as well, right? So it's making sure that they feel they've got the support they need. From an HR perspective, what do you think the people profession can do more of or less of to support with their skills in that space?
Yeah, I'm always, as you know, a staunch advocate for HR people. And I feel like HR people shouldn't have to do any more.
Busy enough.
We're all busy enough, right? We're all stretched and sweating and tired. I think HR pros, again, almost similar to managers, have this space where we need to lead by example. Mm-hmm. We are terrible as a profession at leading on wellbeing. We are terrible as a profession at overworking. And we're terrible at not communicating our capacity and resources. So for me, I think for HR humans, it has to start with us in the sense of if we don't do better, nobody else will. Yeah. So that was my TED talk. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah. But you're absolutely right. I think I've always had this bugbear about that's an HR thing. Culture, that's an HR thing.
Yes.
Wellbeing, that's an HR thing. Performance management, that's an HR thing. I'm like, can't all be an HR thing. That's an unreasonable request, or it's an unreasonable request to say that HR have to own all of this stuff. We definitely have a role to play in terms of creating an environment or helping create an environment, facilitating things and skills and conversations, but we can't do it. We can't go and manage someone on behalf of someone else or tell someone to do better. We're all human beings, we're all adults, right? So we can all act in that way. I think this is a really interesting thing where over the years, from a wellbeing perspective, we've not evolved quickly enough from a people profession to help our leaders and our managers. So what I mean by that is, since the dawn of time, since these lists existed, right? You know what I mean? The trends lists that pop up every year, right? Say, hey, in 2025, these are the top HR trends that are happening. Every year that I remember, near the top of that list has been leadership and management capability.
Yes.
It got me thinking, I think in 2024, when I was on there again, I thought, why do we not get this right? Why do we never crack what it means to be a leader and a manager in this modern day? Yeah. Then I started thinking, as you go down the rabbit hole as you do, thinking, what do I do in that space with my team and with our managers? And I found myself thinking, I think we just do what we've always done. We kind of talk about the role of a manager or a leader as if we were still in the 90s.
Yeah.
And actually the world hasn't evolved and technology isn't different and human beings are not more complicated. But we still say to a manager, your role is to have a difficult conversation. Don't break the law while having an interview. How to have a disciplinary and a grievance. And that's all important stuff, right? I'm not saying that's not important. Where's the conversations around the importance of empathy, the importance of flexibility, emotional self-awareness and emotional intelligence? These are the skills I think, from a well-being perspective, would help our managers kind of take back their narrative and make them feel more equipped to deal with the complexity of well-being within their teams. Does that resonate with you? Do you think that's right?
Yeah, for sure. For me, I think there's something about the adaptability piece for leadership. And I think we also forget that. Like you said, we're looking at leadership as if we're still in the 90s. But the reality is the key skill for me in terms of leadership going forward is about adaptability, because the environment's going to constantly change. Leadership roles are going to constantly change. The demands and what we want our people to do are going to constantly change. Yep. So I think there's something about focusing on what adaptability looks like in our organizations to then work out how we're going to support and train our managers for the future.
Yeah, it's huge. And I said earlier about going down rabbit holes, and another rabbit hole topic is talking about different generations in the workplace and that sort of stuff, right? And there's lots of research and actually conflicting research out there. So we're careful not to stereotype or generalize. But one of the questions I get asked quite a lot through the work that we do at Reward Gateway and Edenred is, have people always been this emotionally complicated? Have employees always thought this way? And I'm kind of pondering on that. I thought, well, we probably always have been this emotionally complicated. I think we're just more willing now to say it out loud.
Yeah.
We're just more, particularly the younger generations who are just more, I don't know, maybe they're braver. I don't know what the right word is, but they're definitely more willing to tell us what they like and what they don't like. They're much more in tune with kind of their feelings and the things that add to their personal values or diminish their personal values. And actually, they're much more willing to walk away from organizations that don't resonate with their own principles and that type of thing. Do you think there's something in that in terms of different generations, different career stages, different life stages, where it just makes the idea of well-being layered on top of hybrid working, remote working, in-office working, get my teeth in? Do you think there's something else, and all of those things intersecting at the same time? It feels quite powerfully difficult. Is that how you're seeing it? Is that what you're kind of feeling and picking up as well?
Yeah, for sure. I think what's really interesting with, and I'll say the younger generation, but it could be, I would feel like this, so maybe it's not, I'm not young, but maybe it's thinking around that organizational citizenship almost, isn't it? Where people want to work for organizations that have an opinion on stuff, that will take a stand on certain things, that will align with their political values and beliefs and that kind of thing. And I think perhaps previously we've been less concerned about that. So I think that feeds into your complexity piece, where actually we're more demanding as employees now. And so therefore organizations need to move with that and take stances on certain things and stand by them as well, right? So it kind of becomes almost a much more important, connected, close piece of work than it had been before. Whereas, you'd expect workers will come in, they will do their job, they will go home. We're of the generation that, we are the last of the overworking generation, right? Where we have to prove ourselves. I hope we're the last. But, my nieces who are between the ages of 3 and 11 are going to have a completely different experience of work and will connect completely differently to work. It's more about life work. As you said life work smashing, but I think there's something about life work integration where we can connect to the organizations that we're working with and work with purpose rather than kind of making it all about work.
Yeah, it's huge. And I think one of the things, when we talk about well-being, we can quite often talk about the traditional parts of well-being. So we quite often think about your mental well-being. We think of your financial well-being is definitely important in this world with cost of living and everything else. Talk about your physical well-being. One of the things I've started to see creeping, certainly onto my list anyway, and I can see it with our employees across Reward Gateway and Edenred, but also with a lot of our clients talking to us about, is climate well-being.
Oh, yeah.
We're actually future employees of the younger generation who are just more educated about what's going on and have access to much more information perhaps than you and I did when we first entered the workplace. They're looking now to see, is the organization they either want to do business with or work with, are they adding or taking away from their world?
Yeah.
So are they contributing to a positive community that they live in, or are they contributing to setting the world on fire?
Yeah.
And that's becoming a real decision maker for people. That's crazy. That would never have entered my mind at all 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, I don't think. Are you seeing that as well?
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? I genuinely find it really fascinating. One of the organizations I worked in, I was a staunch vegetarian, and the organization had a client who wanted sterilisation of pet beds that were used in animal testing. And that was the first time ever that I'd ever had like this, that feels a bit bitey on my values, but they're paying my salary and I quite like the job and the people. This feels a bit weird. So yeah, I think it's a relatively kind of new thing, isn't it? Where we're thinking about our actions and how it impacts society and the world at large. So yeah,
it's huge. And I think it's one to watch for people professionals, because I think, I said, it's kind of crept onto my list in the last maybe 12 months.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of our listeners, if it's not on their list yet, it might be one to maybe get ahead of.
Yeah.
And at the very least, try not to cause scandal. That's how I kind of been liking at the early stages of climate well-being. What people are asking for is, if you can avoid being scandalous, then that's a good starting point for now, and we can evolve what this means over time.
Yeah.
Going back to the physical office space, so obviously you mentioned your background, manufacturing, and for a lot of people, particularly pre-pandemic, it was in the office. Organizations who are trying to entice workers back to the office now without perhaps mandating and feeling like you have to be here, what do you think is important from a physical standpoint in terms of how the office spaces are set up to make it a nice or worthwhile or meaningful place for people to show up? What are the kind of your things that you would love to see or that you've seen other people do?
Yeah, I mean, I think your office is great, right? We had a tour this morning. So I think there's lots of bits that you are doing here that's wonderful. So having, collaborative spaces. I love that you had a quieter part of the office as well. That is such a genius idea.
Yeah.
So having the right spaces for the range of people you've got working with you. So making sure you've got plenty of meeting space if people want a quiet space. Make sure you've got enough space for people who are actually coming in. I mean, that's the big frustration, right? Is people will say, oh, well, I wanted to come in on Tuesday, but there are no spare desks on the software that we've got. Great, okay. So I think there's something about having a nice environment, a nice space where people can go if they want to chat, people can go if they want to be quiet, where you've got snacks, drinks, nice things to encourage people to come back to work, I think is probably a really important factor. And it sounds ridiculous, but things like daylight, access to natural daylight, the amount of offices I've been in where everything's kind of all shuttered off, you've not really got proper daylight coming in and it just feels really awful.
Yeah.
So having, genuinely nice spaces that people want to be in will make a massive difference, I think.
Yeah, I think that's really, really important is how do you create, it's almost like a bit of a destination. How do you create a space that people are not just showing up to because that's what the policy says, but actually when they show up, they go, actually, I can do my best work here, or I can feel like I can be authentically myself here, or if I need a bit of downtime or I'm having a sensitive conversation or speaking to a client or something like that, I know there's a protected area that I can go away to. And actually, to your point about the office space that Reward Gateway and Edenred to, we were very cognizant of things like neurodiversity. So when we were designing these new office spaces, it was about how do we create enough variety in a physical setting that allows people to feel comfortable in themselves. So if you want to come in and be part of the razzmatazz and have all the background noise and all that sort of stuff, you've got a space for you.
Yeah.
Equally, if you want to get your headphones in and get your head down, you do your better work in the office because maybe home isn't set up for you, you've got different circumstances, but actually you need the quietness or you need the focus space. That's an option as well. So it's about giving people choice.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that the quiet space has been a game changer in terms of both here, but also when I go to events, it's really powerful to have that quiet space because I think we forget, having been locked up for a couple of years, not in prison, on lockdown, is thinking about how overstimulating the world is. And I don't think it's become more overstimulating. I think because we've had that quiet space, suddenly lots of people will get overwhelmed by light, noise, people, smells, traffic, all that stuff suddenly feels huge, doesn't it? So I think having those quiet spaces, as you said, for neurodivergent folk, but actually for anyone who just feels like life is a bit much when everything is around me, that can be really helpful. So yeah, I think that's a great shout.
Yeah, huge. So just on the topic of choice, so one of the things we try and talk about a lot across Reward Gateway and Edenred is how do we appreciate people for the human being rather than just the employee? Now, I'm a firm believer that one-size-fits-all HR practices are very much a thing of the past. I think, as we've talked about a few times, the world is so complicated now and so complex, and demands and wants and needs are so much different or more overt, louder than perhaps they have been before. I think trying to fit things into best practice, there's a policy for this that covers everyone. There's a way of doing this because that's the way it's always been done around here. I think it's becoming really difficult to sustain that.
Yeah.
So we talk a lot about holistic thinking, holistic well-being, and appreciating people for not just what they do, but who they are. That's kind of the appreciation message. What do you think about that in terms of giving people variety and flexibility and choice? Do you think that's a nice to have, or do you think that's an essential thing that organizations need to get on board with?
Yeah, I think it probably started as a bit of a nice to have, didn't it? But I think the more time goes on, it's going to become an essential thing because we want employees to be able to have that choice, right? They want to have flexibility. We want them to go and have a decent life outside of work. And the way that we work enables that. I think that's the right thing to do, is make sure that we've got that choice, even in terms of things like benefit spend. Actually, I don't want to put into my pension over and above the basic. I would much rather invest it into training or into a gym membership or, that kind of stuff, I think is really powerful. And I know as I left my last corporate job, I was looking into effectively an individual wellbeing budget where you could spend it on what you want, because effectively you can't force everybody to team yoga in the office, and equally you can't out yoga a bad manager. So there's that kind of principle of like giving that choice and enabling people to do whatever wellbeing looks like for them. So yeah.
Yeah, I think there's something in there. The yoga thing always makes me smile, and because that for a long time, and I remember this back in my previous corporate lives as well, when wellbeing wasn't really a thing, it was kind of a box that a lot of organizations ticked.
Yeah,
but the
free
box,
fruit Fridays.
Yeah, exactly. That. Free fruit Fridays. But the thing that was always done is, we put on yoga here, and that was on like things like job adverts. That was listed as a benefit, is like lunchtime yoga. By the way, if anyone's listening and they're a yoga fan and that works in your business, more power to you. That's great. But I guess my point is, I think we've come far enough where employees can kind of see through the tick boxes.
Yeah.
And particularly in the space of well-being, if it's not authentic, if it doesn't feel like actually the organization really does care about them as human beings, and indeed they are just going, God, we've got to do something in the well-being space. Let's give some fruit, or let's put on a yoga class once a quarter and say, we take care of your well-being here. People can see through that. Yeah. Is that something you're seeing as well?
Yeah, definitely. I think employees now are much more wise, aren't they, to the performative stuff. So yeah, I think there definitely has to be something that really connects people, coming back to connection again, but something really connects people back to what that well-being looks like for them. I know in the HR Geek Squad, we've got a wellness app that we can use, but it's not just about like steps per day or running or, doing some great big physical activity. There's stuff around, doing a Sudoku or something, because it's mental wellness. So there's something quite nice in that, I think, where you can choose if you want to do a great big walk and get extra points, you can. But equally, if you want to sit and do a meditation, you still get good points. So I think there's something about letting people work out what well-being is for them. And I know in my last in-house role, we did a cycle, and it was in the office. So we had a static bike.
Nice.
And the employees decided that they wanted to cycle to the equivalent of our HQ and back again. And I've never seen engagement like it. And it was just a static bike in the office. People were going mad. People were cheering them on. If we'd have done we've got to cycle 135 miles before July, nobody would have done it. But because the employees had kind of decided that's what they wanted to do, they arranged a static bike. We had all the cheering. We made T-shirts. That sort of stuff made a real difference. So I think there's something about engaging in what works for you personally and having those choices enabled.
Yeah. And I guess employee voice is a key part of that, right? So actually listening to your people, or dare I say, asking for their opinion.
No.
Yeah, crazy, right? Asking for their opinion on the things that matter to them most. I've seen so many organizations, and I've fallen into this trap myself in different organizations as well, that burn through so much money and time and resource on health benefits, well-being benefits, that no one, they don't know exist.
Yep.
Because, historically, I don't think the people profession are great marketeers. That is getting better, thankfully, but I think that's a skill for us to have to think about. Or B, it's not for them. They don't care. It's like, I don't want a yoga at lunchtime. I want to, I want to have a PMI, or I want to have something which is like a well-being allowance where I can choose whatever I want. I can go on a holiday or buy a gym membership or spend it on a book benefit or something like that. It's through choice. So I think it's one of those things where we have to really consider from a people professional perspective, when the to-do lists are massive, budgets typically are getting shorter.
Yeah.
I champion this phrase of how do we do less with less and make it count. So it's using or asking our employees, what do they want? And going there rather than this blanket one size fits all approach, particularly in the well-being space.
Yeah, absolutely. You want something that means something.
Yeah, exactly right. So just thinking about another thing, when we talk about blended workforces, we typically talk about where people work.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things we don't talk about as much is the types of workers that we have. So we have people who work full-time, part-time, contingent workers, key workers, all that sort of stuff. Obviously, you've come from an industry like manufacturing, which might be shift work or stuff like that. Have you seen any really great things that happen in where you've got workers who are working less time, more time, night shifts, all that sort of stuff, of how you keep them connected with their well-being to make sure that they are aware of what's going on and make sure they feel connected?
Yeah, interesting. I haven't seen anything great coming out of anywhere. I know in my manufacturing days, we used to have a permanent night shift, which was hilarious. Like, you cannot get better for employee drama than a permanent night shift. But I think there were things around making sure that they didn't work overtime because they had to drive home during rush hour, for example.
Sure.
we did, and interestingly, it does feed back into flexible working. So we had a project where we created cell-based working. So each production line was able to be its own cell effectively and decide its own process on annual leave, time off for the kids, school holidays, time off, that kind of stuff. And that actually worked really well. So we gave them a level of autonomy in that space. So I guess that comes back to flexibility and choice, right? For me, as an HR pro, I was making sure that I always went to see the night shift. And I felt like the night shift leader nearly dropped down dead when I first walked in on night shifts. They were like, why is HR here? What's happened?
Yeah, I'm in trouble.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I haven't seen HR in 10 years. What's going on? So I think there's something, again, isn't there, about connecting with those different workers that we've got in some fashion. So whether that's visiting the night shift, the late shift, anything in between, whether that's making sure you're connecting with part-time gig workers, that kind of stuff when they come in, and making sure that their experience of culture, well-being, communication is the same at whatever point they touch it. So
yeah, lovely. But again, it takes that kind of deliberate thoughtfulness, doesn't it?
yeah.
That kind of, I will stick an email out and assume everyone reads it, but then you go,
Yeah.
actually, they don't even have an email address.
Yeah.
Or you put it on this notice board, which no one walks past, or something like that. But it's all about making sure you understand your organization, understand your physical environments, where people are working, and adapting accordingly. I don't think there is a silver bullet, by the way,
No.
that says this is how to do it really well for those types of workers. But listening to people, finding out what works, and also being a bit brave and a bit creative, trying things out, going, well, we give it a go.
Yeah.
That didn't work so well, so we're going to divert our attention and try it a slightly different way. I think that's okay as well. I think employees, they relate to that. If they can see, particularly HR professionals, trying different things out for the sake of trying to connect to them as people,
Yeah.
they're kind of willing to forgive
Yeah.
mistakes, delays,
Yeah.
a benefit which didn't quite land, but we wanted to give it a go anyway, just to see.
Yeah.
Because that just shows them that you are caring, and it's not just a one-size-fits-all approach, right?
Yeah.
Now, as we sit here, we know, right? And everyone listening who's an HR professional will know, because we feel it in our hearts. We know that well-being across any type of workforce is absolutely the right thing to do. But not everyone thinks the way we think, right? Not everyone thinks people first. Some people think task first, money first.
Yeah.
And I'm not generalizing here massively, but the CFOs of the world, the CEOs perhaps, are a little bit more traditional. How do you think we can get better as a people profession at articulating the value of something like well-being to an organization?
Yeah, I think it is really tough. And I think there's something about banging on the door, isn't there, about consistently showing up and talking about it. And I think one of the things I used to do was have a kind of a rolling conversation list. So if it didn't land the first time, I'd go back and think about how I could pitch it the second, for example. I think the interesting thing, particularly with the organisation that said we are not a work-at-home organisation, was having the ability to be able to demonstrate that and show that actually we had a really good sales year despite our people not being in the office. So I think there's something about being able to speak the language of the CFOs and the CEOs. So being able to get data and have those conversations, but also putting it in a meaningful way that means something both to them and the employees. So I do a lot of talking around storytelling with data and making something interesting and telling that tale, whatever that looks like. So whether that's benefit take-up data, whether that's cost per head of what you're doing, that kind of stuff can be really impactful. So I think it's understanding what language will tweak the right people.
Yeah, I think that's really, really key. And I think context is everything, right? So I think, if you have business A and business B next door, they might be in the same industry, but they've got very different challenges, maybe very different demographics of workers, different access to different technology. So replicating in business A and business B, just because you think, oh, that's just what we have to do, that might be the worst thing any organization can do, because you've got to make it contextualized to your problems, your customers, your technology, all that sort of stuff. And being able to tell that story, I love that, with the people data that resonates, not just with the hearts, because again, we know it's the right thing to do. It just feels intrinsically the right thing to do. But actually with the calculators of how do we calculate this into commercial success, either through productivity, better profitability, less turnover, all that sort of stuff. It's massive. And I think that's something that our listeners will be really intrigued to find out and learn more about, is how do we take the hearts and the calculators and blend them together to say, it's not just the right thing to do, but actually it's the only thing to do for a successful business
Yeah.
now and in the future.
Yeah. Exactly like I said, it's the whole human principle, isn't it? And we're employing whole humans. We need to work with them.
Yeah, absolutely right. Michelle, just as we start to wind down here, one of the things I'm going to ask everyone on this season, which is all around well-being, is for their own personal top tips on what well-being not just means to you, but actually what you do in your world to keep yourself thriving.
Yeah.
So have a think about, you mentioned boundaries a few times, and you've mentioned your home setup and some downtime and that sort of stuff. Is there one thing, it doesn't have to be one thing, by the way, 'cause you might have a couple of things that you want to talk about, and that's fine. Is there a couple of things that you could share with our listeners that you do personally in the space of well-being to keep yourself thriving as much as possible?
This is a really good question. There's a couple of things. So I manage my energy, not my time. And that has been really powerful for me. So what I was doing was just managing my time, not my energy. And I kept plowing through when things were really hard, or I'd find myself sat on my desk from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And the reality is I wasn't very productive during those times. So managing my energy means tuning into what I've got capacity for that day. And working on, okay, well, today I'm feeling quite tired, so I'm going to have a bit of a break, or I'm going to have a longer lunch, or I might make sure that I've got nutritious lunches made the night before if I know it's going to be a hard day. So managing energy over time is really important to me. And then we've touched on some of this already, but the 1% rule is huge in my world. So 1% better, 1% different, 1% more healthy, 1% more positive. So the 1% marginal gains rule is something that's really important to me and my well-being. So a lot of the time I'll do, I might have had a rubbish day, for example, or I might have been really crap at taking my medication. And I'll go, okay, fine. Tomorrow then, let's make it 1% better. Cool. Let's lay out all our stuff the night before, or whatever we need to do. So for me, I think there's something about managing energy, not time, and then working on those 1%ers each day to make it better.
Love that. Really, really simple way to distill it. What a lovely way to end the conversation. Michelle, thank you so much for talking to us about your experience of well-being. I'm absolutely certain our listeners are going to be like, yeah, do you know what? I love that. I'm going to take that away. I'm going to think about that in my business. That 1% thing really resonates with me. We don't need big bang changes in our lives. We just need to make sure the next hour is better than the last hour, even just by 1%.
Yeah.
All right, Michelle, thank you for joining us. Great to see you.
Loved it. Thanks.